Peace. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. This is Draw. Yeah, I got another video talking about the blacks of Australia and Tasmania. Now, I had a couple people ask me, if so-called black people were in these different parts of Europe and, even Asia and, North America, South America. He said, where are they at now? And that's a good question. And I can't go in depth with all those nations, but one nation we're going to talk about in particular is Australia and Tasmania. And this is going to be a good synopsis of what happened in all those other indigenous lands, whether we're talking about Asia or Europe or the Americas, because it talks about how the land was invaded by, you know, uh, the Caucasian, and basically they took over the land. You know, what you do when you conquer a land, you kill the men, you take the women. So that's how, Australia or Tasmania, particularly, we're going to talk about today, how it became predominantly Caucasian. Now we know Tasmania is right, it's an island right south of Australia, right? And these are the original people of Tasmania. Um, and as you see with the prominent nose and facial features, these are Aboriginal people, what they will call, so-called black. These are what people will call black people today, just in that part of the world. All right. Now these are modern day Tasmanians right now. This is a image of uh, Aboriginal Australian. This is in some museum in Australia. So I got a question. How did this, you know, picture right here become the picture to the right? And you see the brother with the, what we used to call him back in St. Louis, twisties. But you see, you got the, just this, regular, hairstyle that, we like to wear, black people like to wear. It's just part of our hair style. But how did that become this? So we're gonna get into it. So the Tasmanian Aboriginal people. Um, this is from the Encyclopedia, Britannica Encyclopedia. So Tasmanian Aboriginal people self-named Palawa, any member of the Aboriginal population of Tasmania. The Tasmanian Aboriginal people are an isolated population of Australian Aboriginal people who were cut off from the mainland when a general rise in sea level flooded the Bass Strait about 10,000 years ago. Their population upon the arrival of European explorers in the 17th and 18th centuries has been estimated at about 4,000. Historically, the Tasmanian Aboriginal people spoke languages that were unintelligible to mainland Aboriginal peoples. All right. So when that European got there, they were about 4,000 people, right? Keep that in mind. All right. Now we're going to skip down. So it says the first permanent white settlement was made in Tasmania in 1803 and 1804. An unprovoked attack by whites on a group of Tasmanian Aboriginal people was the first episode in the Black War. You see how they called them Black War. They called it a Black War because it was against so-called black people, right? The whites treated the Aboriginal people as subhumans, seizing their hunting grounds, depleted their food supply, attacking the women, and they also sexually assaulted the women and the girls, and killing the men. Attempts by Tasmanian Aboriginal people to resist were met with superior weaponry and force of the Europeans between 1831 and 1835, ostensibly in a final effort at conciliation to prevent the extermination of approximately 200 Tasmanian Aboriginal people. They were removed to Flinders Island, their social organization and traditional way of life destroyed, subjected to alien disease and attempts to quote unquote civilize them. Most of them soon died. The death in 1876 of Trigini, Tasmanian Aboriginal woman who had aided the resettlements on Flinders Island, gave rise to a widely propagated myth that the Aboriginal people of Tasmania had become extinct, and they were extinct. This was an act of genocide, allegedly, even though the United Nations said that this doesn't qualify under the code of genocide. So that's why they haven't classified that. But this is what happened to many of those countries when the not just the European, but the people from the Caucasus from Central Asia. They invaded the land. They brought a lot of their diseases, and they brought also some of the technology they had learned, and they basically was able to wipe out a lot of the indigenous people, and they were able to take the women, and they still were able to procreate. There are some people in Tasmania who claim to be Aboriginal offspring, but they're the offspring of a European Caucasian father and an Aboriginal mother, and we know that the seed line goes from the father to the son to the child. So, they can claim the Aboriginal title because of maybe they have quote unquote melanin, but we know the seed line is from the father. So, you know, the original Tasmanian people were extinct. Well, let's go into a little detail of the Black War. This is an article from the Wikipedia. Just want to read this in detail, what it really was it about. So the Black War was prompted by the rapid spread of British settlers and agricultural livestock throughout the areas of Tasmania that had been traditional Aboriginal hunting grounds. Historian Nicholas Clements has described the Aboriginal violence as a resistance movement, the use of force against an invading or occupying enemy. He said the Aboriginal attacks were motivated by revenge for European atrocities and widespread kidnapping and murder of Aboriginal women and girls by convicts, settlers, and soldiers. But particularly from the late 1820s, the Aboriginal people were also driven by hunger to plunder settlers' homes for food as their hunting grounds shrank, native game disappeared, and the dangers of hunting in open ground grew. So, they said the Aboriginal people, they were attacking the Europeans out of revenge because they were, basically getting attacked. They were, basically taking their women and their girls as, concubine slaves. And, they didn't like that, of course. So European violence, meanwhile, was motivated by mounting terror of Aboriginal attacks and a conviction that extermination of the Aboriginal people population was the only means by which peace could be secured. Wow. Clemens noted as Black violence grew in intensity, so too did the frequency of revenge attacks and preemptive strikes by frontiersmen. So that was basically the premise of the Black War. This is image of an Aboriginal Tasmanian man. You see right here, he's throwing a spear, with this basically loincloth, 1838. But, a spear can only do so much to, actual gunpowder and, diseases that you've never seen. But as you see, so-called black men, casualties and losses, says dead 219, dead 600 to 900 dead. And that ranges because they didn't really count them. They weren't really documented as, as really human. So they didn't really count them as a loss. So their death could have ranged from the thousands, because originally, they were about 4,000 in number, and it went down to about 300 by the time the end of this Black War. This brother right here is named William Land. He was born in 1835, died in 1869. He was an Aboriginal Tasmanian man. He was known as being the last full-blooded Aboriginal man in the colony of the Tasmania. So he was actually the last man. There are some offsprings, like I said, of the Caucasian European and the Aboriginal woman, but he was the last Aboriginal man of Tasmania. And so he lived out his life, and then he died. Then he came back from a whaling expedition. He died I think in his late 30s, early 40s. But upon the death of a Tasmanian Aborigine named William Lane, aka King Billy, in 1869, his head was removed from the corpse and sent to the Royal College of Surgeons in London for study, and his scrotum was fashioned into a tobacco pouch. To this day, the whereabouts of either body part is unknown. Wow, so that's just the type of things they did to these people. They really treated them like, basically like animals, And that's why when we talk about the curses in Deuteronomy 28, these people fit the curses. I know our people, like to claim the curses. I don't know why we really like to claim curses over us, but these people really fit the curses of the Bible because they were actually exterminated. That's why I don't really have any doubts that these people were the descendants of children of Israel. You know, but I'm not saying that to necessarily blame the Caucasian. The Caucasian was was given the authority to rule this earth in the final days of this society in the last days to fulfill prophecy. That's what the Most High has commissioned the Caucasian to do. So I don't blame the Caucasian. I really blame our people because we're the ones that sin against the Most High and we refuse to repent. We refuse to come back to Him. That's why He allows these atrocities to come upon us. And that's why He said that we're going to be few in number. Just want to put out this quote. This is Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 27. And the Most High shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Most High shall lead you. That's a prophecy that's always been ongoing. Our people are very low in number. We may feel like, we have a big predominance in this quote unquote Western culture, as we call Black culture, Black influence, but really it's only elect that the Most High is going to salvage, and it's not many of us. When I say many of us, I'm talking about the so-called blacks of the captivity. So, we just have to strive to be a part of that group. All right, I think that's all I got. All right.